I'm on.
Okay, welcome everybody. So let's see, I'm gonna put this back into full screen. All right. Okay, so today we're going to talk about effective teamwork and how to code effectively in a team, and a bit about project management. So let's start with just teams in general. So how many people, if you read this article, type it in the chat now and you'll make Dr. Tallman and I very happy. So, okay, I see some yeses, some a little bit, I'll take a little bit. So it is kind of a long article. So, I mean, skimming it, you get much of what's there. So it's an interesting article. Google obviously is a very high performing company. And, whoops, let me get rid of that. They did some research. Google's also a very data-driven company, so they tend to analyze everything, collect data on everything. So they did some research on what makes some of their teams more effective than others. And this article summarizes it. Well, they looked for all sorts of things, but in the end, they found two things that were common across teams, because they found teams were very diverse, right? Some had a very strong leader who set the direction. Some of the direction was really set by consensus. So they really couldn't find a strong theme there, right? That you needed a strong leader or that you needed a consensus on everything. Both of those seem to work for different teams. But they did find that for most teams that were high performing, they could observe that all the team members tended to speak around the same amount. So if they look over the day, they speak roughly equally. And what they took this as is interesting, of evidence that they're all engaged, they feel valued. No one person is dominating, and nobody's kind of withdrawing, where they just don't say much. They're not participating. And on average, they also had high social sensitivity. Basically, people tended to be aware of the emotions of other team members. If someone's feeling left out or not bought into the strategy, they tended to notice, so they could take some action. Okay, so okay, I accidentally paused the recording, so unpause it there. Type into the chat if you got any thoughts on this. What do you think? Did you agree with the article? Did you not agree? Did it seem logical, not logical? Okay, so I see at least one agreed. Anybody else? Made sense. Okay, so I see a few people saying it made sense. It makes sense to me too, but I would say there's something to bear in mind with it. This is not in the article, but I know many people at Google, and I do a considerable amount of work with Google as well. Google is a very high performance company, and it has very high performance expectations. So they tend to be very rigorous in their hiring. They hire people that they believe are top notch. They do performance reviews annually, and those aren't done just by the manager. They have a very robust peer review system. So you get all sorts of feedback from all the people who worked with this employee for the last year. What do you think? So there are high performance expectations, because one of the things that you want in a team is you want to combine essentially a high trust environment. And that's what I would say you're getting in this. Okay, so that is high trust. People trust each other. They have a high level of engagement. They can say what they think. They feel valued. All great things. You do not want to, but you also need high performance expectations, that we're trying to get something good done. We have high standards for ourselves and for the overall team. Because you could have a team that's very friendly, and I've had this in my career. I've had teams reporting to me where this was true, where they're very friendly, they get along well, they have a lot of fun during the day, but they actually don't have the high enough standards, and they're not getting enough done. So you really need to combine these things. And it's not in the article, but Google definitely has that. So my advice when you're making a team is you're trying to combine both of those things. In a way, this equal speaking, it sounds easy in this article. Like, well, let me ask a question. And Dr. Tallman, I see you like the points on the importance of psychological safety. And yeah, I totally agree. So that goes to trust. You can say what you feel, and you can disagree with the rest of the group, give your opinion, and you're not going to be shot down for it. So all good. But one way that you could take this article, which I don't think you want to, is, well, all we have to do in a team to be high performing is to each speak the same amount. So we just have to make sure when we're talking to our CI and our TA, that we divide up our 30-minute session with our CI into 10-minute increments, and we each speak the same amount. And there we go. We're high performing. It's just that easy. And I think that would be incorrect. And the reason it would be incorrect is it's kind of confusing this an input and an output. So in my opinion, this equal speaking is at least partially an output. Maybe not entirely. You do want to, somebody's not participating, you want to reach out to them, figure out why they're not participating. You don't want to speak over them, etc. So there's a good behavior in a team. But this equal speaking is also an output where once you've created a high trust environment where everybody's engaged, it's natural that everybody wants to contribute and say things. So it's output. It is also partly an input. So if you find, some team members aren't speaking, that's bad. Think about how to change that. But naturally, high trust teams tend to move towards this equal speaking. Otherwise, it'd be pretty easy. Like I said, you could just guarantee everybody talks the same amount. Bob talks from 10 a.m. to 11. Sue talks from 11 to 12, and we're good, right? We've done everything we need to be a high performance team. When I was at Altera, they would hire executive coaches sometimes. There was a very skilled one named Thomas who came to Toronto to do some coaching of me, and it wasn't remedial. This was like people who basically they were kind of grooming for higher leadership. And he came to my staff meeting, and he did this all over the country, going to staff, or all over the world, really, going to staff meetings and just observing how the meetings were run and giving feedback. And I hadn't thought of this, but after my staff meeting, about a dozen managers who all reported to me, he said that was a very high trust meeting because basically people would just present, okay, here's what's going on, here's the data, and somebody would say, that data doesn't look right to me. This looks funny. And they'd discuss it for a while, and then we'd say, okay, well, go dig into that, let's take it offline. And it was interesting because I hadn't really thought about it. That's just the way the meeting was. But he pointed out that's a high trust environment because you have people actually questioning the data that someone else is presenting in front of their boss, and they're not getting defensive. They're basically just saying, oh, yeah, that might be funny. Well, let's go talk about that. And that's really what you'd like. Okay. So you'd like to have open discussions, honest discussions. You can even have in front of your TA. That's a sign of a high trust environment, and that's what you're going for. Okay. So I'm going to put you quickly in breakout rooms. We've talked some about high performing teams. I want you to think about what are the top 3 characteristics that make an effective team in your mind. So this could be anything. It could be some of the things we just talked about. Could be some ways you want to work together. What are you going to try to achieve in your team this semester? And let me quickly start that off, and then we'll come back and just share a few ideas with the group. And what did you come up with? So let's see. Put you in a lot of breakout rooms here. All right. So that is your challenge. Top 3 characteristics of an effective team. Okay, so we're back. Anybody want to share by just unmute yourself or type in the chat what'd you come up with? Okay, so effective teams, I'm just reading off one of the things from the chat. Effective teams emphasize ease of communication. Okay, so here, I'm just going to write down some of these ideas. So ease of communication. All right. Freedom to contribute any ideas about negative consequences, understanding of each team's role. Okay, so ease of communications, they can contribute with negative consequences. So clear roles, that's another thing you're saying. Makes sense. Humor, right? Humor is good for bonding, right? Trust is like you got to trust people, so you got to get along. So it's true. We're all humans. Synergy, we're all on the same page. So shared purpose, I would say. Okay, so shared goal, purpose. Okay, so one person at least said humor. It's basically, bond, camaraderie. Yeah, so you want to have fun. It's a great idea, right? And that helps build trust. It helps build commitments. People don't want to let people they like or have fun working with down. So don't forget that we're all people. Safe space. So yeah, high trust environment. Whoops. So we kind of talked about that on the last slide, but it's a great point. So a safe space means you can communicate openly, you trust each other. Similar expectations on qualities. So yes, shared goal or purpose, I would say, fits into that one. Being true to your word. Okay, so yeah, so true to your word. which is accountability. I mean, as part of trust, it helps you have trust, but it's more, right? You also, when you say you'll do something, you will do something, or you'll tell them they can't. Care about the other teams, back each other up, understanding, responsibility, respect. Yeah, so respect. Can't have much trust without respect. You do want to kind of have a team spirit, care about your teammates. It makes you give more, okay? Feel that you're working with each other, not against each other. So these are all great ideas, okay? And there are more in the chat, so I'll let you read those offline. So I think you've captured basically all the things that I thought of. So my top 4, actually, I see another one of never give up, never let them down. And yeah, that makes sense. So people work for a team in the end. Like, people seem to be hardwired for this. They want to join a team. They want to believe in that team. They don't want to let their teammates down. So there have been studies done in the military, basically, about what keeps people going under terrible circumstances, like actually in battle. And it's not abstract ideals or love of country. It's basically not wanting to let down their comrades. So, and I think that's just a fundamental part of human nature. Strong teams, people in the end do not want to let down their teammates, and that's what makes a strong team. So try to build that bond. So kind of team spirit. So all great ideas. Okay, I thought about what are my top 4, and these are all good ones for high performing teams. So open discussions. So tell it like it is. Don't let things fester, but be constructive. Okay, you don't want to destroy team spirit, which means when something goes wrong, you don't say, "Oh, you are a complete idiot." You instead focus on what went wrong. How can we do better? But you also don't just paper it over and pretend that there are no problems. Talk about it. Accountability. So this was mentioned. So you have to be able to trust that when someone says they're going to do this, they're really going to do it. Things go wrong, so they won't always achieve it, but they are open about there's a problem. I made a mistake. We need to figure out how to solve this. Transparency. So you don't hide things. If something doesn't work, you say so. You don't evade. This destroys trust if you don't have this. It makes your team much less efficient. And trust kind of goes with all of these things. If you have open discussion, if you meet your commitments or you say you didn't, you're transparent, it helps build trust. By itself, it's not enough to get to a trusted state rapidly. So people need to see each other, to spend time together, to build trust quickly. Now, that's actually more challenging this year because you're not in the same spot. You're doing this all virtually. My strong advice is to don't try to attack this project by just doing everything where everybody's coding off by themselves and you're only communicating through Git and when you have a meeting with your TA or your CI. Set up some Zoom meetings, some phone meetings, so you guys are brainstorming. You're even just coding, and you've got each other on video conference sometimes, because you're trying to replicate as best you can the spirit of being in the same space, and you get to know each other. Now, if you already know your teammates well, okay, that's easier. But if you don't, this is actually pretty important. It's hard to trust people, at least quickly, without being together in the same spot. And I, again, saw this many times in my career. I had to work with teams that were often geographically remote. And we could work together for months and not have very high trust. Sometimes raising problems first with the CEO before raising them with each other, which is really bad. And once we sent some engineers, I sent one of my top engineers to Malaysia to work with the team there for a few weeks. We had way better trust because you just get to know people, and it just seems to be hardwired into humans. Okay, so you're going to have some meetings, and this is both to mimic typical industry practice. So you're getting used to some best practices, which is you have regular team meetings. You should probably have more than this, but we're going to make sure you have some at least. So you have one with your CI, one with your TA. You're going to have written status. So I've released a quick start guide on how to use Wiki, which is a common, fast to edit web page that people use for status reports and many other things. Try to keep these meetings productive. Write down good status, discuss it clearly with your CI and TA. First, your CI and TA are going to be more impressed and give you a higher grade, and your team will work better. You want to show transparency and accountability, two of the things I just talked about, in how you run these meetings. So you want to give a concise statement of what was done and not done. So it's important that you don't give a long, meandering, what's called a weather report. So you basically say, well, on Tuesday, I wasn't feeling super great about coding, so I had 12 coffees, but then I found I wrote too much code. I mean, no one cares. They care. I struggled to get my milestone, my part of the coding done, so I'm behind. Here's how I'm going to try to catch up, right? You want to create accountability by getting to a single person ownership of various tasks. So accountability where you say the team will get this done by a certain date is too vague. You need to, that's where you start, but then you need to break it down to Ken is going to get this done. Vaughn is going to get that done. And by certain dates. It's not good enough that we'll get this done sometime before the due date, maybe 30 seconds before the due date. And that's not good enough. We need to figure out what are reasonable completion dates so we can put it all together without too much stress. Your CI and TAs have done this before. So they can mentor you in this. Ask questions. How do you think we should attack this? Any feedback? We're going to give lots of formative feedback in this course, so take advantage of it. Okay, so the wiki. It's your team's memory and your to-do list. So you write down key data, you write down what do you have to do next, and we want target dates and we want owners for what you have to do next. This doesn't have to be an incredibly long list, so we're not looking for you to write down such a detailed list of things to do that you don't even want to read it again. Make it succinct so it actually helps your team. Write down what's been done. So what happened? Did everybody meet their commitments, or were there some slips? There will be some slips. There will be some changes. So just write down what happened. You can write down lots of detailed data for your own team, but make a summary then for CI and TA. Your TA and CI probably don't want all the details. You should already have an email with your initial password. You should change that and log into your wiki. Only your team, your TA, and your CI can see it. Well, course instructors, actually, all the TAs and all the CIs can see it, but only your own TA and CI is probably interested. So don't worry about other teams seeing it. They can't. Sorry. Okay, so it sounds like I froze for a minute there. My apologies. My internet's a bit dodgy today. Hopefully you can just read this slide because I'm not quite sure where I cut off. But basically, make sure that you've got a summary for the CI and TA, and you have target dates, owners, and then you track, what actually happened. So Ken, if a part cuts out, let me know where I should start again. Okay, here's a sample wiki. Okay, so this is my team's wiki, and we write down, Ken and I write down, here's our plan, right? So our key priority is milestone 1. We're going to be finished by January 28th, test it till February 1st. We're about half done. We're also still working on WD0. What do you think? Is this good? Yes, I see Grace saying it's not good because it doesn't show who did what. Any other thoughts? Needs more information? Yeah, it's pretty early deadline. Early deadlines are actually good. Okay, so want a table explains who did what, more details. So yeah, this is not great. This is going to result in a pretty bad mark on project management and the wiki. So it doesn't have any clear division. It doesn't divide the tasks up amongst people. It's kind of, it hasn't actually divided up tasks much at all. It just says we'll finish milestone 1 and we'll finish it as a group. Not great. Okay, so what about this plan? Okay, so read this for a minute. So I see someone asking, can we not use Trello? I haven't used Trello. If you put a link to something on your wiki, we want basically instructors to be able to find whatever you're doing. So you have to put a link to it on your wiki. Then you can use it and you can basically show it to your CI and TA and say, what do you think? If they like it, it's fine. But what we don't want is we just can't find it. So you got to put a link to it. Okay. We're less concerned about the precise technology by which you record this and more concerned that you do it electronically so everybody can see it. We have a link to it from the wiki so we can find it. And then you follow these principles of dividing up the tasks and tracking what happened. Okay. So here's my second milestone 1 plan. Okay. Or another team, Bob, Rob, and Cobb. So take a minute and read this and tell me what you think. So is this better? Anything else you'd change? Yeah, I didn't change all the dates. So yeah, some of these are completed by the past, which is fine. When you're going over to the CI and TA, sometimes you'll have like, this is my plan and we're already past that date. That's fine. Then obviously you should have, did it happen or not? Okay, so I see people saying it's better, shows the division of work, but a table would be more readable. Is it uneven? Yeah, let's see. When I look at this, it does look like Cobb's not doing that much. So it's a bit uneven for sure. Your TA is not going to micromanage you on that. So your team can, you can assign tasks somewhat unevenly. We do want to see everybody contribute. So we don't want someone who doesn't write any code. But if the whole team is okay with an allocation that's somewhat unbalanced because they feel someone is a more productive coder, that's okay. Don't make it extreme where Cobb doesn't do anything. All right. Does that make sense? So yeah, this is much better. It's got due dates. It's got actual tasks assigned to owners. It's not very balanced, so they probably didn't do the smartest job of this. Like Rob has got a lot of work, right? Everything else. Also, this add load map code is necessary for speed. Well, that's actually going to involve a lot of very tight interaction with Bob. Bob wrote a bunch of functions, but can write them slow, and Rob is supposed to kind of fix that. So that might not be the smartest division, but from a project's tracking point of view, it's reasonable. Maybe they just haven't chosen the smartest initial plan. But I agree, it'd be better in a table, okay? So a lot better. If we just move this to a table and reformat it, it gets a lot easier to read. Okay, so here's the plan between Ken, myself, and Abid. So we've divided up tasks. What do you think of this one? Okay, revamp is not very concrete. Yeah, this one is a little vague. That's true. So maybe we can make that a little more specific, how we know if you're done or not. At least the tracking of what's been done is a little more concrete. 3 out of 6 buttons are done, but probably we should have said a little more about what this means. I'm going to revamp the user interface, and there are several sub-items. You're right. But at least here, gives some sense of progress. It's organized, it's clean. Yeah, so this is better communication. And you should be updating this plan. Your plan should be a living thing. So you want it to be easy to see at a glance. And easy to update because that keeps the team on track. If you create it, and you want this table to kind of be a reasonable size. If you track things at an extreme micro detail, you have 200 entries in your table, it's not actually going to get anything done. Your team would be like, I can't update this table, it takes forever. So you got to choose a logical level of abstraction. So yeah, this is much better. And we're tracking not just what was our initial plan, but because we know it's not going to go perfectly according to plan, we're also tracking what really happened. Okay, so Ken finished his, he was supposed to get a bunch of the drawing code for milestone 2. So this is not this milestone, the next one. He's supposed to get it done by February 17th, and he did it. So that's great. I was supposed to have things done by February 18th, and I have no progress as of February 19th. So that's not great. Okay, and Abid's partway through. So you may have some notes, like we've got a key risk here. So this item, street drawing, is behind schedule. So we're going to revise the due date. Basically here you have an example of, we've got a potential low performer. I mean, I'm looking dodgy, and Ken and Abid are looking nervous. So you don't want to hide this. They should be clear that they're getting nervous about what's happening. So they're going to discuss with me, they revise the due date. But they also want to make clear to me, to the TA, that this can't continue. So they've actually got a backup plan because they're worried, what if I haven't made any progress so far, maybe I'm just not going to make any progress by this later date. So if I don't make progress, if I don't get this done by February 22nd, the day after, they're going to reallocate it to Ken because they really need it done. And that's obvious to me in advance. It's obvious to the TA, the CI, everybody. So we all know what's going to happen. And if this happens and I don't get anything else done, if this happens and it's, whatever, it's a one-off issue, I'm generally performing well, that's fine. The team just reacted well, it's good. If this is an ongoing thing for every task or many of the tasks assigned to me, then TA is going to start asking some probing questions about, okay, is Vaughn actually getting anything done, right? Because it seems like Ken's doing all his work, so it seems like Ken should get Vaughn's marks. What do you think? Let's discuss that. Ken, what do you think? Should you be getting my marks at this point?
Well, maybe a few. Yeah, I'll take those.
And your TA will do that, right? So you're basically flagging your TA and your CI. Well, your TA is like your engineering management. So not only you're flagging this to your teammate, which is only fair and hopefully corrects the behavior, you're also essentially flagging it to your management. And your TA will allocate marks asymmetrically, so Ken's would go up, mine would go down if this continues. But we want to see that the team has made an attempt to manage it. Ken didn't just do all the work and then at the end said, I did all the work and I was super frustrated. Why didn't you do anything? He's communicated, you're slipping, I'm gonna have to take your tasks. We've got an issue. It's only fair he would then get more marks because he did more, did more of the work. Okay, so yeah, it's a good wiki. It's measurable, owners and target dates, easier to read because it's organized. Highlights a key risk here of maybe I'm not performing well. And that's clear to everybody. Okay, wouldn't this cause tension in the team? Not if you do it. I mean, it could cause some tension. So maybe I would prefer that Ken just did all my work. Okay, so that might be my preference. So maybe my least tense thing is, Ken, how do you feel about that? Do you just want to silently do all my work, but you want to hide that from the world at my request?
Yeah, no, good question, Vaughn. And I think here that, as you were mentioning earlier, being able to talk about these things frankly and directly at an early point in the project before they become a problem will lead to a team that succeeds.
Yeah.
Not having that direct conversation tends to lead to problems.
Yeah, so probably the best thing to do is Ken tells me, like, he shows this to me and we discuss it before the meeting with the TA, right, and CI. So the first time I see this is not in front of the TA and CI. It's not a surprise. He's been open with me. He's been telling me. Maybe I'm not entirely happy about that. I get a little defensive. Okay, that's just, but he's telling me like it is. He's being transparent and he's not papering over an issue. Hopefully I rise to the challenge. If I don't, he's been completely transparent. He's told me, this is what I need, and he's written it down. We can have the discussion in front of the TA. If I disagree with some of it, I can tell Ken, but it's open. That's better than letting it fester, because what will happen, and I see this all the time in both teams I ran and also teams in this course, if you just try to paper it over, as things get harder and Ken can't do all the work, then the tension explodes. So you don't want to get to that point. You haven't actually run your team in the best way, okay? Does that make sense? Sorry, it sounds like I froze again. Am I back now? Ken, can you hear me now? Sounds like
I can. You just came back. Yep, Vaughn, I hear you now.
Okay, so I'm sorry about that. So I just muted because I couldn't take the tension. So don't paper over it. In my career, I've had to fire people, multiple times. And actually, most of them actually still am friends with. They'd come visit me even at Altera, like come back to the company, and I've actually had to fire them. But I was very clear with them. This is what you need to do. This is where you're falling short. So they always felt they were treated fairly. Okay, so that's actually the key. Does that make sense? Ken, can you still hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine, Vaughn.
Okay, so we'll see how this goes. So I'll reboot my router after this. Okay, let's move on to project management. So there are two extreme versions of project management and then hybrids between them. So one is called waterfall development. And waterfall development is kind of this linear process. So you come up with requirements, you move to design, implementation, verification, maintenance. Okay, so early on, you can make changes very cheaply. You just want to change the requirements, you haven't done much, fast. As you're designing your software or your system, it costs more to make changes, but it's not too bad. As you get further down, changes become more and more expensive. So the idea is do a lot of upfront planning, get things right the first time, and you're going to have a more efficient, cheap development process. So makes sense, right? And I think you were probably taught this quite a bit in APS 111, 112. Okay, the other extreme in terms of development is iterative or agile development. And what that does is you still do some, well, in the extreme version, you do very little planning, right? You would make a prototype as fast as you can. You would basically test it and evaluate it, see where it fails and refine. And ideally, you get this all the way out to your customers. You actually have end users testing it and telling them what they think, okay? So the less extreme versions, that's the more practical, is, you still make a plan. So you make a plan, you don't just build this prototype with no discussion, but you make the plan pretty quickly. So you accept that it's going to be a bit vague, and parts of it are going to change. So let me put you in breakout rooms again. And I want you to discuss what the strengths and weaknesses of each of these are. What do you think of each of these? How do you want to run your project? Okay, sorry, let me figure out if I can
Now
make the breakout room work.
you're back now. Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to work on my internet. So, okay, so I'm gonna put you in breakout rooms again. And I want you to discuss the strengths and weaknesses of Waterfall versus Agile and where your team's going to lead, more towards Waterfall, more towards Agile. As I said, people do tend to use some hybrids of these. Okay.
Hi, my network just cutting down, and could you please assign me to the breakout room again?
Actually, I'm just closing them. Sorry. So we're not going to have a short, long breakout for this one. So
Okay. It just was a cut out.
yeah, so they're about to close anyway. So
Okay, thank you.
okay. So any thoughts? Just type them in the chat or say them. Can there be agile development when the requirements are fixed? Yeah, I mean, if you know the requirements, that's fine. You still don't know exactly how to meet those requirements best, so you have a lower degree of uncertainty, but still, you can definitely use agile. If the requirements aren't fixed, then even more reason probably for agile. Agile is what companies want to transition to since it matches the style of modern programs. So you're right. So Agile is ascendant. So software development, it's pretty old school now to do waterfall. Some older companies will still do it. But it's been shown that it's not as efficient as Agile. People just aren't as good at planning as they think they are. And it's actually moving to other industries. It really started in software, but it's moving more and more to other industries. Okay. I see people saying, maybe somewhere in the middle, which is true. You should still do some planning, right? I mean, I asked you to do a division of tasks to people. The thing is that division can be done pretty quickly and you can iterate on it, which is what Agile would allow you to do. But you're right. You do some planning. You don't just say, let's have complete chaos. We'll all be coding away without ever talking to each other. And this is where I said, no plan survives contact with the enemy. And that's the key thing. Agile, you plan quickly, you start building, you find some of the plans wrong, you adapt. Okay. I see someone saying waterfall probably works better when you've done something really similar before. That's true. If you know exactly what you're doing, exactly how to do it, then you can plan further. The more uncertainty there is, the less you can really plan, the more agile you go. Okay, so those are all good points. So it seems like most people prefer agile, which I think is a good idea. It is ascendance. So Waterfall's strength is it's efficient if you can plan well. Agile strength is it's hard to plan well, so you can iterate quickly instead. And the Waterfall's weakness is planning paralysis. And I've seen this many times in industry. I mean, Altera, this is before I joined, but it almost destroyed itself by spending a year trying to plan an entirely new CAD system, and it was just too complicated. They couldn't do it. But they didn't back away from Waterfall fast enough. So Agile methods are now dominant in software. Here's a book about about how open source software and rapid development really is ascendant. It's also moved to hardware. This is the way you tend to develop hardware now, and it's spreading to other industries. So I'll show you a quick video of something from SpaceX, but SpaceX and Tesla have applied this to both rockets, which seems crazy, agile development, prototype, refine rather than upfront planning. NASA does tons of planning. SpaceX, obviously does some. They don't just randomly weld metal together, but they expect their prototypes to fail. They they build their manufacturing lines to actually be efficient for rapid changes, so they can prototype faster. Tesla's doing it with cars. Other companies trying to copy them. Wikipedia and Nupedia. Who's heard of Wikipedia? I think most people have heard of Wikipedia. But type it in. Okay, it's one person who hasn't heard of Wikipedia. What is Wikipedia? It's hard to believe. Yeah, so Nupedia. Who's heard of Nupedia? Okay, I hope people are actually pulling my leg. Ken, I hope you've heard of Wikipedia. Nupedia was basically an online encyclopedia that was centrally planned. Okay, it'd have experts write every article. And Wikipedia was its competitor that was actually done by the same group, but a subgroup in that. But it was basically everybody can go on Wiki and just edit, and it'll be revised quickly. So Wikipedia is Agile, Nupedia was Waterfall, centrally planned. By the time Nupedia had 50 articles written by experts, Wikipedia had tens of thousands. So it was obvious that Wikipedia was the way to go, and it won. So Agile is really fast. Let me show you a quick video. This is if you're following space. This is SpaceX Starship rocket, which looks like a science fiction thing. This is the rocket to go to Mars, right? That they're trying to build. This is without its booster. This is just the second stage that they're testing. Okay, so let me just show you a video of this. And you notice there are two on here. There are two because they have the one that's going to be tested right after the one on the right. The one on the left is already ready to go. So they basically expect the one on the right to not work perfectly. And that's probably good because this thing has to go up. They set it up 80 kilometers in the atmosphere. It rotates and tries to skydive back to Earth. So it presents as big a profile as it can to the atmosphere. And so that it'll basically come back not too fast. And then it rotates again and tries to land vertically so that they could actually land this on Mars. That's the idea. Okay, so here's it flying. All right, so sorry about that. So that is it flying, and let's see what happens in a few seconds. Let's skip to the end, but it blows up, okay? Okay, sorry about that. I think my internet is not, you can go find lots of videos that's online if you didn't see it blow up. I think my internet is not the best. Ken, hopefully you can hear me now again.
Yeah, I can hear you fine, Vaughn.
Okay, but anyway, it did fail. It was a glorious failure. If you didn't see it on the video, go online. It's kind of a wild explosion. But they did this before with their Falcon rockets. Their Falcon rockets blew up repeatedly until they were able to consistently land them on their tail again, which now they do all the time. So now SpaceX actually can undercut everybody's costs to put things in orbit. And their key strength has been rapid iteration. So it works even in rockets. If they can iterate fast in rockets, you can iterate fast in software. Okay, last thing is you should set measurable milestones. So in this course, we've done that for you. That's why you have we set milestone 1 through milestone 4, because actually for larger projects, it's really important to have milestones, because otherwise you follow basically the curve on the bottom. The team feels too relaxed for too long. And only late in the project do they realize we're way behind and they try to work really hard, but it's too late. They can't catch up. If you set measurable milestones, you spread out deadline pressure. And you also counteract the natural inclination of engineers to kind of gold plate things, try to do too much, because they always feel some deadline pressure. So setting measurable milestones have to be measurable, have to be things you can't fake. Can't be we're kind of half done. It has to be the following tests work or the program is this fast. So we've largely done that for you in this course by setting the big milestones. It's not a bad idea to set in your wiki additional interim milestones. Have half of these functions, these specific functions will be working by this date that is halfway through this milestone, or better yet, a third of the way through this milestone, so that you kind of front-end load your schedule. Okay, so let's talk quickly about coding in a team. That was how do you manage a team in general. Let's talk about code. Okay, so let me just remind you of how Git works. So you're going to use commits to move things from your working copy, the files you're editing, to, let's see, is this working? Okay, I think I cut out again. This is annoying. All right, so you're going to use commit to send things to your local repository, push to send it to your teammates, and they're going to use pull to get those changes. Do that often, okay? So your daily work is going to look like this. You come in, you pull the latest code. You want to see what have my teammates done. You try to do something not too big. So fix a bug, enhance a feature, build it, test it, and right then, before you do anything else, commit it and push it so your teammates get it. Okay, sometimes your teammates might have pushed something in the interim, which means that Git will refuse to do the push. So then you do a pull to get teammates changes, you build and test again, you retry the push. Okay, so the key here is before you start something new, pull your teammates changes. You're trying to do integration all along. So do this often, not just at the end of the milestone. If you do it at the end of the milestone, there's a very high probability something goes wrong and it's a high stress situation. Okay, so we want to code productively in a team. All right, so we want multiple team members working at once without wasting work or blocking each other's progress. Okay, and this actually is hard. So this is a classic book, The Mythical Man Month. It's by the engineer who was in charge of the rewrite of one of IBM's mainframe operating systems. And basically IBM wanted this project to be done faster. So they kept asking how many man months, now we'd say person months, was this going to take? And they'd say, okay, well, we want it done faster, so we'll just add more people to it. So we divide that many man months by a larger number of people, it's going to go faster. And the more people they added, the slower it went, because they had more people to train, more people to communicate. So this is a classic book because it says you can't make software projects go faster just by adding people. You need to be clever if you're going to add people. Okay, so how are we going to avoid this? You do not want to be a morality tale for this. Okay, and let's see, we don't really have time for breakout rooms, so I'm just going to skip this. Any ideas? You want to just type them in the chat of how are you going to code productively in a team? Okay, so you make people work longer. You're going to try to avoid that. That's kind of the okay. Assign different functions. Yeah, so split up the tasks. I see have group coding test sessions, so that's a good idea. Yeah, so communicate when you finish something, split up the tasks. So these are all good ideas. Split up the tasks, you're working on different things. If you communicate often, you're agile. You can see when does somebody finish a task, you can reallocate. So your task list can be dynamic. All good ideas. Pair coding. So it's another idea. And I see assign functions that depend on each other, the same person. So yeah, when you divide up work, think about how to divide it up. So you minimize communication. Okay, so yeah, discuss the functions as a team. Choose who's going to implement each one. So you're splitting up the work. Commit when it works. When you do this, consider how hard the functions are to try to divide them intelligently. Consider which ones are related and give those to the same person. You can divide just some of the functions at the start because you don't know how hard they all are. and then you adapt as the work is completed. So that's kind of more agile. You say, I don't even make a plan for everything. We're just going to make a plan for the first half of the functions, and then we'll see how it goes, and then we'll refine the plan. So these are all good ideas. Okay, so we split up functionality. We can now work on different files or different functions, and we're going to use the procedure I just talked about to be pulling code. So basically, both Tony Stark and Bruce Wayne can pull the code, build, test, make their own changes. Whenever they got something new that works, they commit it and push it. So they're constantly keeping up with each other's changes. Sometimes the code's not completely independent. Maybe there's some common functionality that they need to share. Okay, so they can still do this, right? So they're mostly editing two different files, and that guarantees they're not editing on top of each other. But there's some common code that they're both editing the same file. This still works, but it requires more communication. So they want to talk to each other before they make changes to this common file to make sure they're both not changing the same thing, and they're going to wind up with Git conflicts that are going to take time to resolve. So, okay. And yeah, so continuous integration means commit a lot. Okay. If you're constantly pushing your code, your teammates are pulling it, you're not leaving an integration task for the end, and you don't know how long that integration task would take. So you're de-risking the project. It's also easier to move tasks between team members. You're going to wind up with some things take longer than you thought, and some things are probably easier than you thought. If the code has all been put back to the remote repository, it's easy to move tasks between people. If it's in one team member's working copy and it's only, he's made all sorts of changes, he doesn't know how to commit it because it's going to break other people's code, it's hard to actually help that person. It's hard to move that code around. Okay, so you want to commit often, but you don't want to break the build. So what's breaking the build? You don't commit code that's going to not compile or breaks tests that used to work, because that halts development by their team members. And so it impedes their productivity. Now you can comment it out, so you can still merge it if it's not quite working, and you can still make your commit, still push your changes, but don't break the build. Make sure it's still compiling. Okay, another thing you can do, so I'm going to go a couple minutes over, but again, if you need to go, this will all be recorded. You can split development and test. So developing new features, so Tony Stark's developing new features and Bruce Wayne's testing. And you spend more time typically testing and debugging than developing. So this is quite productive. And the other thing is it's actually massively parallel. This is the one place where even late in a project, you can add people and get gains. Okay, it's hard to add developers late, but you can add a whole bunch of people to testing and developing, and they don't get in each other's way. Okay, the last one was also mentioned, pair programming. Okay, so pair programming is two people working on one computer, or in this case, you might be doing a Zoom meeting where you're both looking at the code at once. Okay, and those are given names. The driver is the person writing the code, and that person's focusing on the details. The navigator is reading the code and giving feedback. So they're focusing on strategy. So maybe in milestone 1, they'd say for a certain function, like, what if there's no street name that matches that find streets from partial name? Doesn't look like you've considered that case. I think you need to write some code for that. So they're thinking a bit higher level. And it's a bit more tiring to be the driver who's actually writing the code. So switch roles frequently. And you should each have some Git commits. So your TA is going to look at your Git logs to see who committed what code. And that's going to form part of your style mark and project management mark. You don't want to say, well, we always did pair programming and Ken was always the one who was the driver. I was giving advice. It's just there's no evidence of that. Best practice is to switch roles frequently, so that shouldn't happen. You should each have some Git commits. Okay, you want to talk a lot, and if you get tired, you can stop. This can be tiring. Okay, if you need, this is fairly self-evident, but if you want to go look at a tutorial, there's one linked there. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is just, is this efficient? So you got two people writing one thing. Is that productive or not? And there have been a bunch of studies of that. The basic answer is you do write less code, but that code tends to be higher quality. So if you have the mistakes that the driver, the person writing the code, would have made, and you have the mistakes that the navigator would have made, only the intersection of those make it into the actual code. So yeah, it took longer to write because you had two people, but there are fewer issues. It also helps a team become cohesive. So in new teams, this helps people get to know how they work, build trust, understand what each of them finds easy to read, and so on. So there's a social aspect to this. It helps spread expertise. So there's mentoring. If you have actually someone who knows a lot about programming, someone who knows less, this is actually a very efficient way to train up the less experienced members. And I guess I already mentioned this. It helps team members read each other's code. So you develop a kind of group coding style that makes the whole team more productive. So most studies on this say that this is actually more productive for new teams, or if one programmer is not an expert because of all these benefits. If both programmers are quite experienced and they've worked together before, then usually coding separately and just integrating is more productive. But initially, you guys are going to be in that new category. So this is probably a very good strategy. Okay, and I'm going to stop there. Next week, or sorry, tomorrow, we'll talk about solving team problems, because you are going to have some problems with conflict. So how do we deal with that? I'll stay on the line in case there are any questions, and hopefully the audio was not too bad. I will reboot my router tonight and try to diagnose what's going on.